Welcome, divas and dudes, to Powerhouse Bakery. We are ready to do a really fun dish today. I've got my beautiful setup here with my induction cooking cooktop. I love it. It's so fun to experiment with a new style of cooking. Remember, if you ever do induction, you have to have special pans in order to make it work. And what I'm going to cook for you today is a no meat loaf. So, just to let you know, there's no meat in it. It is going to be made with a bunch of really great ingredients. As we really learn how to eat more from the earth, that's what we're going to do today. So let's get started. The first thing I want to do is start making my lentils. So I'm going to add water here to my cooktop, and I'm doing 4 cups of liquid. The good thing about lentils is they're not very picky. Really what's important is to make sure that they don't run out of water, and they really only have to cook for about 40 minutes. So I'm going to show you how to set this up, and then I'm going to show you ones that I've already cooked just to save some time. But I really want to show you how it's set up. So I put in 4 cups of water, and here's my 1 pound of lentils. I'm going to pour the whole bag in, and to make sure that I have just about right amount of water, I want you to see it's about 2 fingers tall above the lentils. So about 2 fingers, what is that, about 1.5 inches? That's how much water you want to have over your lentils. And then the other thing is we gotta season them. So if you've ever been around plant-based cooking, or you've ever tried anything from Powerhouse Bakery, you know that spices are super important. So not only am I going to add in some of my quinoa spice, I've got organic thyme, I've got some sage, I even have a little bit of some really cool spice combos, which is a blend of shallots and tarragon. So I'm going to put about 2.5 teaspoons in my lentils. Super important. You always want to season plenty. The other thing I love to add into lentils is a bay leaf. So make sure you have a friend with a beautiful bay tree. Talk to my wonderful buddy Judy, or of course you can buy them, but make sure they smell amazing. When you open your jar of bay leaves, it should smell fantastic. If they're dingy and not very aromatic, you probably have some old ones. Toss them out, get some new ones. So this is what the lentils look like when we get them all set up. We definitely are going to need salt. In my spice blends, I did not add any salt, so don't let me forget we need to add salt. But right now, it's just going to start. We're going to do a simple, easy simmer, and in about 40 minutes, these guys will be ready. And I've already made us some, so check these out. Now, these are actually a little bit wetter than what I'd like yours to come out as. This is our repurposing of our curry lentil here at Powerhouse Bakery. But see, there's my bay leaf, so you see that in there. But this is actually going to be just fine. When we start making our no meat loaf, lentils are going to be the base. And like most recipes, there's going to be some adjusting that you'll want to plan on doing. So when you have all of your ingredients, just know that you might have to add a little bit more dry ingredients or a little bit more wet, depending on how much your lentils cook and how much water is still in your lentils. So I'm going to put those right there, and we're going to use them in just a second. The next phase is to do some chopping. So here I've got my beautiful carrots, and the recipe that I'm going to show you includes celery, it includes, of course, onion. You can add garlic if you wanted, and it just so happened at Powerhouse we did not have any celery, so just like in normal cook form, if you're at home and you don't have a recipe ingredient, don't despair, you can always substitute, especially when it comes to veggies. So I have a beautiful yellow squash that I'm going to add in place of the celery. Very similar. Yeah, the celery is going to have probably a little more texture, but the eyes eat first, and I'm thinking at least if we've got this beautiful yellow squash, it'll be nice in our mix. So I'm going to do a quick chop. Now, another option in this recipe is to put everything through your food processor. And it makes it more of a homogeneous texture, and that's okay. Kind of, what you're thinking of as a meatloaf at home, one that you're going to try to replace and maybe surprise your friends and family with a healthier option. from the typical beef meatloaf, or I think sometimes meatloafs are even made with pork and different meats. But if you wanted to have a little more of a home-style texture, you might want to leave your veggies unprocessed. Because notice that those lentils are already a really good texture. We just need to thicken it up, and we need to make sure that everything slices into a beautiful meatloaf style, because that's kind of what we're looking for. And you know, when we do our plant-based varieties, we want them to be similar, but we also want to have a distinguishing characteristic. We don't want anybody to be surprised and be disappointed if they get a bite of something and if we're expecting it to be something that it's not. So in this example, I am going to top it with a salsa. If you've ever had meatloaf, typically it's covered with what? Yeah, ketchup. And so I decided to top mine with something that is a little different. So in a second, I'm going to show you what it looks like. But in addition to my carrots and my zucchini, I'm also going to add in some mushrooms. Here's a little bit of olive oil, about a tablespoon. And I'm going to add some green onions for color. And of course, you can't go far without using onion. Onion is so important in everything. So I've got two different onions, the scallion as well as the yellow onion. You could also do a great job by adding in red onion. You could even add peppers. You could add jalapeno if you wanted to make it a little bit spicier. Mushrooms are cool though, because not only are they a high source of vitamin D, they also give that umami flavor. If you checked out Pinterest, you would probably see that there's quite a lot of meatless dishes that have 100% of mushrooms as the base. So this is just a component of the flavor, but it's nice because it adds in that umami. So I'm going to drop those in as well. And the recipe calls for about a half a cup of each of these veggies. So again, you can add a little more or less. Remember, it's all going to be based on your preference. But one thing I want to always emphasize is see if you can match the ratios. So how much lentil to veggie, and especially that liquid, so that it doesn't fall apart on you or it's too dry, because the texture is going to be really key. But look how pretty that is. And I'm going to be sure to add in some salt to this base. Anytime you're sauteing veggies, salt is super important. Don't be afraid of salt, because when you're eating a plant-based diet and you're not buying any processed foods, you can definitely be comfortable with adding salt at your table and of course in your cooking, because you're still going to be so much lower in sodium than anything you would ever find in a processed form. So these are going to cook for about, maybe 5 to 8 minutes. Again, I like to have a little texture in my meatloaf, so I'm going to let those go just a little bit. Another ingredient that I'm going to add is these beautiful walnuts. So I am going to do a rough chop on the walnuts before I even consider doing a food processor. So it's going to be a half a cup, and we definitely want to have this one pretty well chopped. Because again, your palate would not expect walnuts in a meatloaf. So that's going to be something that adds texture as far as density and thickness, but we don't want to have too much of a mouthfeel of a nut. Also, it's going to give us a great healthy fat component, so we want to make sure that's in there too. There we go. And remember, whenever you're scooping your veggies or anything into your skillet, use the dull side of your knife so you don't hurt your nice sharp edge. So that was a 1/4 cup, and here's one more 1/4 cup. So notice behind me I've got my food processor, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to show you that on the camera, but I am going to show you the results. Any food processor will work just fine. You don't need a fancy one, but KitchenAid is one that you can find at H-E-B, and it's a great little size. All those chopped, that looks pretty good. So again, we're doing a rough chop. It's a half a cup, and it's all going in. Look at this. So when you're thinking about more veggies, we know we're automatically adding more fiber, both soluble and insoluble, and we're really taking out a lot of stuff too, right? So much less saturated fat, and true, less protein, but not a lot less protein, because we're using the darling of the plant world, which are our beautiful lentils. So I'm going to put a little bit of these in the skillet also, mainly because I want to dry them out. Again, this is a leftover, So ours is cooking fresh right here, but I wanted you to see how pretty this is. And I'm going to pull out my bay leaves. It's a good idea to let them sit in your dish, but when you're getting ready to serve it, take it out, because again, that would be a shock to see that in your plate. But it's all veggies. So here we go. Now we're looking at a great source of protein. So the veggies that I've added in are low in protein for sure, but what research is showing us is that a plant-based diet is so fantastic for prevention of all kinds of diseases, not to mention cancer, of course diabetes and heart disease, because of decreasing the fats and decreasing the total calories. Some of the exciting research is also saying even because of the decrease in protein. So there's a lot to be said for including plant-based nutrition for overall health, not just if you're trying to lose weight or trying to fight off a particular disease, because we always want to think of prevention rather than treatment whenever possible. So this is looking beautiful. Let's check on our lentils that we're cooking from scratch. These are a nice soft boil. That looks perfect. And if I wanted to have the water come off a little faster, I could take the lid off, right? But for purposes of this today, I'm going to keep it at a low simmer with the lid on so we can really focus on what we're doing here. All right, so this is just about ready. One more little stir in here. Let me show you some of the other ingredients that are going to go into our no meat loaf. That's looking great. So I've got our beautiful salsa right here. That's going to add in. And I've got some homemade hummus. Let me show you that. So we always love to have a little leftovers, right? So the beans, black beans, are a perfect add-in to our no meat loaf. And look at this gorgeous homemade hummus. Let me show it to you. So pretty, right? Guess what makes it the bright yellow color? Yeah, you're right. Lots of turmeric. I use the curry it up spice, which is so good for so many things. So now I'm going to turn down the heat, because now we're going to start mixing them all together. So our saute is just perfect. And see, since I put them in the skillet a little bit, it just took off that extra moisture. I want you to see the texture that we're shooting for. Here comes our black beans. And again, the recipe's going to show you it's about half a cup. Put in my whole black beans. And my salsa, so a tablespoon of salsa. And here is our beautiful hummus. So you do not have to have homemade hummus. You can use store-bought. H-E-B has got some great new hummus out on the shelves. There's some that are even kind of sweet, so be careful of those, only because you might not want it to have a sweet overtone, but this one is really fun because it's kind of spicy. There's also a traditional hummus that will have some lemon notes and a little bit of cumin. Then there's a garlic one, which is also lovely. So anyway, let your palate kind of decide where you want to go with hummus. But for this one, we definitely added in a good amount of the curried up spice. All right, so now we're going to add in all of our beautiful ingredients here. I'm going to do a quick stir, and then I'm going to pulse it just a bit in that food processor so you can kind of see how the texture is going to vary. But look how pretty it is so far. I mean, there's a lot we can do with it just in this state. But it's got good consistency, and we want to think of it as kind of a thick stew. That's the texture that we're going for. And I'm going to, again, partially pulse it in that food processor, and then you can see what it looks like. So check this out. I didn't put the whole thing in. I'm leaving a little bit because I want to have some varied texture in there. There we go. And now check it out. So this is going to be what kind of looks like meat, right? It's got a nice chunky texture, but not too chunky. We don't want to have a big walnut in our bite of no meat loaf. But it's coming together really nice. The next thing we're going to want to do is preheat our oven. So we need to have it at 350. And you can use parchment liner for your loaf pan if you want, or you can just spray it really good. I like the parchment because it makes it easier to depan, so I do recommend you do that if you can. I want you to see how pretty this texture is looking. See that? It's got a nice little varied bit of yellow, and of course if we added more green in, we could do fresh parsley. But I like how it's giving a nice texture. This might be a little bit on the loose side, like I mentioned, because of those lentils, so I'm probably going to add a tablespoon of my coconut flour. And that'll be just enough to pull it together so that when it cooks, we get a nice slice of meatloaf. So let me grab a little bit of coconut flour. And like I said, you want to have some of these ingredients handy so that you can adjust. And what I always tell my cooks here at Powerhouse Bakery is you want to try to do a recipe one time through exactly how it says, and then look for the texture variations, because whenever you're working with plant-based products, this is going to vary a little bit. So that's going to help us a lot. It just kind of pulls it together and it'll make it a really nice cut. The other trick is when you're getting your meatloaf out of the oven, you don't want to check it right away because it's probably going to seem too soft. You've got to let it cool, and then it'll be much easier to slice. All right, I think that is just about perfect. Now let's get our pan ready. This is my loaf pan that I'm going to use. And so again, you could even use a disposable one. And this is my piece of parchment paper. And it's okay to even let the edges stick out. It makes it easier to lift out your meatloaf when it's all done. So I'm just going to roll it around the edges. I'm going to pour my meatloaf mixture in. There we go. Beautiful. And then you don't have to wash anything because it's so nice to just lift it out, throw away the parchment, and you don't have to wash your pan. Well, at least very much. Okay, here we go. I'm going to pour it in. So take a note. See how it's pretty thick. When I used to work in the hospital setting and we were working with occupational and speech therapy and we were trying to help patients that were having swallowing difficulties, we learned how to have descriptions of foods. And so this is almost, I'd say it's thicker, it's like mashed potato consistency. I think that's a fair way to describe it. But it's going to be so pretty when you slice it. You get a little bit of mushroom, you get a little bit of those bright colored veggies, and when I top it, it's going to be so pretty when we cut it. Go. Alright, so I think that's close. Now I'm going to finish it off. We always want to use some beautiful fresh ground pepper. Again, you could use some hot peppers. And if you haven't started putting some coriander or fennel or some other interesting seeds, you could use juniper berries in your pepper grinder. Oh, it'd be so fun. Lots of interest. Alright. So that is good to go. I'm going to put it in the oven. So start off with, my recipe is going to say 30 minutes. The one that I'm going to depan in a second actually cooked for a total of 45. So you always have to adjust it too. But you want to see about, probably a third of the way through, you want to put your topping on it. And so that's where that salsa is going to come in. So it gives it a nice, kind of a caramelized topping. So this is going to pop in the oven. Again, it's going to be 350. Try to get it in the center of your oven space. It's always important to double check your racks. Make sure they're right in the center. Because you really don't want this to get too brown on the top until all the center gets fully cooked and solid. Okay? Let's go ahead and depan the one I've already cooked so you can see it. It's still a little bit on the warm side, but I think I'm still going to be able to depan it. Before we go over there, I'm going to turn off my lentils because they are looking gorgeous. So I just wanted you to see how pretty they are before I take them off the heat. Notice that the beans are still nicely formed. Unlike the one that I used, right, with all the extra goodies in there, this is really what yours is going to look like. They're a little bit more uniform shape. There really isn't any liquid added in, which is going to be so fun when you add all your toppings in. Your sauteed veggies and your mushrooms and walnuts. And again, you can add to your food processor just half of your batch, and that way you'll have a nice texture, okay? All right, so let's decan this baby. So here is my loaf pan, and I'm going to use the sides of the parchment to lift it out. Yeah, and just look at that, it had to go and break. Okay, I'm going to slice it so you can see it. It's got a great texture though. I'm totally confident that this is going to be a great meatloaf. Perfect. I'm going to slice it. So like I said, it's better if you let it chill, and then you can serve each piece right on your plate. This is so pretty. Here is my plate. My broccoli on the side. I've got some beautiful little peppers for garnish. And here's my slice of meatloaf. Got 1, 3 slices. There we go. And a little dollop of salsa at the end. So pretty. So this is kind of fun to do for maybe a holiday or I don't know, like a Sunday dinner. Just give them a little surprise or something new and different. Make sure you give them some extra garnishes on the side too. And it's also fabulous with some homemade cornbread, which I'm going to bring onto Powerhouse Bakery very soon with blueberries. I can't wait to show you. So I'm just garnishing the plate with a few whole walnuts, and I've got some broccoli. So when you look at this whole meal, we have got 14 grams of protein in our slice, which is about probably 1/9 of the serving. So it's a pretty conservative slice. 14 grams of protein, 109 calories total. And then our broccoli is going to be 60 calories. And of course the walnuts are going to add about 9 grams of fat. So a great little meal. Eat more veggies, everybody. Great to see you today. Come back and see me soon.